Getting into this 5-5 stream game was interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, it was a 5-5-10 mandatory straddle, and many more straddles took place. I believe the biggest straddle we saw was $200, but I won't spoil the action on that one yet. The game is also uncapped, which means you can buy in for whatever you want, and everybody was slated to come in for at least 3K, myself included. Additionally, I had just spent the better part of the past few hours playing 1-3 match stack in the regular part of the room, not on stream, and I had gotten my butt handed to me. Well, I might have actually handed my own butt to myself, but I'm not sure exactly about the logistics on that. Regardless, I was coming in on a decent sized loss for that game and about to play a whole lot bigger. I also spent a really high fraction of this stream session pretty dang card dead. Because of this, and the commentator's insistence that I did nothing special when I ran hot the previous game, and that I was super tight when it came to VPIP, I decided to include every single hand that I was dealt.
Saturday night, 5-5 uncapped, but actually these gentlemen have decided to have a mandatory 10. So it's going to be 5-5-10 uncapped. Matt Vaughn in seat 4 for 3K. Got Brendan, first time on the stream, a fan of Matt Vaughn, coming in for 3,000.
Aw. Thanks, Brendan. Not every single hand managed to register on the card readers, but it was pretty close. I want to do this also just to show you guys what the trajectory of a session can really look like. It's not always just these big, edited down hands where it's super exciting the whole time, and it's actually something I've been considering doing in the vlog as well, in terms of just showing every single spot that I've been dealt. Let me know in the comments down below if this is something you'd like to see.
Races to 25 with his King 19. Got a bunch of collars.
Recently been vaccinated, I believe, and getting back here in the mix. He said he was a fan of Matt Vaughn, so he's going to honor that and get him in the mix here so he can play with his buddy Matt, or if he's a fan of Matt, I'm not quite sure, or how they know each other, but Brendan in the mix due to Matt Vaughn being here in seat 4.
Nice.
Like it here on the button. Plays a lot better. Finished third place. Here are my winnings.
I thought you'd respond.
I was sleeping, Rank.
All
I'm
right.
not going to lie.
You were. There's Matt Vaughn in seat 4. He'll fold, as does Trey. There you go.
I don't want to hear any yelling from the chat.
Getting down into the meat of the action, in this hand, I look down at Queen 10 suited in the hijack, and I bump it up to 40 at 5-5-10. We get one caller from WSU Jim in the big blind, and we go heads up to a flop of Jack 10-4. Now, this is a board that, when he checks us, could go either way, but I think given that we have second pair, no backdoor besides straight draws, and a board that could really get pretty ugly potentially, second pair is a pretty natural check back, so that's what I do. Turn is a king, which is one of those straightening cards, but also puts a possible flush draw out there. WSU Jim checks once again, and at this point, I think that we can bet for a combination of value and equity denial. He's going to have some just random ace-high hands, some underpairs, some draws, and at this point, when he checks twice, I don't really think he's super strong, and he's very unlikely to check raise us. I put out a bet of $70, and he just folds. Easy game.
So 10 is an automatic now, and with some strong sauce.
10? Looks like the gentlemen are talking about.
The vlogger Matt Vaughn up $15. He won a good amount on Wednesday night. He's been seen here at the lodge a lot between Wednesday and today, and we're glad that he's enjoying himself on his trip to Texas. We'll see some good vlogs.
Running super hot on the Wednesday stream. Getting gifted really thousands pretty much. Wasn't really doing anything spectacular, but was the beneficiary of some poor play from his opponents, but also was playing smart and sound.
75. Also want to mention, hit 5,700. Yeah, game day with
I didn't
Chris
know that. I didn't know there's always
50 is the 3-bet from it. We do our best.
Of course. I can't stand Rick's terrible jokes. You need to hear how
Forward to seeing Mike the Knock Mattisau. You know, just
away here to the lodge. Game. Shoot me an email on the
people come in. Came for Johnny's 10-8 offsuit. We'll fold. Matt Vaughn over to Matt Vaughn with Queen Deuce. Matt hasn't really had much to play yet.
Look at on this stream, the more they tell their friends and family, come down to the lodge from Connecticut.
After getting up to a whopping $15 profit and then promptly having to fold at least a full orbit, I finally get back into the mix with ace-queen suited, raising it to $50 in the cutoff. At this point, I decided that opening a little bigger probably made sense even at the 5-5-10 level just because we're so ridiculously deep. E is in the small blind. He 3-bets with king queen off, which I think is perfectly reasonable. John G wakes up in the big blind with pocket jacks and makes a 4-bet to $405. It's back around to me with ace queen suited, and given that I don't have a lot of info on John G, his age would suggest he's tight, but his outfit would suggest otherwise, so I'm a little bit conflicted here. Ace queen of diamonds I think is just too good of a hand, and I don't want to release, and I don't really want to 5-bet and get jammed on. There's just really also no good size I can make it here because John G has put in somewhere around a quarter of his stack. I'm also significantly deeper with E, so if he ever has a hand and I end up putting in a bunch more money when I'm behind, that's really not ideal either. I decided to just call and see what E does. The suited version of this hand is a little bit more playable post-flop, even multi-way. E thinks about it and decides to come along as well, which I'm a little bit skeptical of, but I don't really hate if he has a little more info on John G than I did. The flop comes out 9-4-3, rainbow, and while we do have one of our suit, John G just goes ahead and bets 2/3 pot, $800. At this point, there's just no decision. If he'd bet significantly smaller and had significantly more behind, and maybe if we were also heads up, I could certainly entertain calling, but here it's just a clear cut fold.
From single A to the majors in
45 minutes. The hottest man on platinum.
My next playable hand actually comes pretty soon after. I pick up ace queen once again, but this time in the offsuit variety, also at 5-5-10. Unfortunately, we see that this time we can't even get any action, although I guess at least this time I won the actual pot. In this next hand, it folds all the way around to the final 2 blinds, and Phil doesn't really want to play the hand, but we can't chop. I offer to just put in $100 blind and check it down, so that's what we do. We end up winning this one. Again, this is the biggest pot we've won tonight, and we played it blind. I guess I should take some people's advice and not quit my day job. In this hand, we're playing 5-5-10-20. There's an open from the hijack for 75. I'm in the third blind, which means I've got $10 in there so far, and with king 10 offsuit and being second to last to act, I decide to just come along as well. Trey comes along too, so we go 4 ways to the flop, which comes 6-3 deuce with 3 clubs. I have the 10 of clubs, but given that we're super multi-way, it's going to be rarer for me to actually get value out of this hand, even if I get there, and it's going to be pretty likely that there's some reverse implied odds as well. So I'm not really looking to play a big pot here, and I'm somewhat relieved when it checks through. However, the turn doesn't improve us at all. It just pairs a top card with a 6, and given that there are multiple players in the blinds in this hand, I don't think we have a particular range advantage on this card. I check, Trey bets 175, and there's a call, so now I just have a very clear-cut fold. Even when a club comes, a king or a 10 comes, there's just really no guarantee my hand is best here. I do end up folding, a club does end up coming, and it would have ended up being good. I guess I just suck at this game.
Not gonna lie. Haven't heard anybody.
I don't know if he's got his chips too close to the reader.
Possibly.
He follows her in her car. They open the front door.
Continuing my theme of really only getting big ace-x hands for value here, I look down at ace-king of clubs first to act in a 5-5-10-20-50 game, I think. I bump it up to $150. We go heads up with Phil, who's in that final $50 blind with ace-deuce suited. The flop comes out queen 10-3 with 1 club, with a gutter, 2 overs, and a backdoor flush draw. I figured this is a pretty good spot to bet and potentially consider barreling off. I bet 100. Phil calls with his ace high and backdoors, and we go heads up to the turn, the deuce of spades. Phil checks, and even though this hasn't improved me from an equity standpoint, I think I can still apply a lot of pressure to one pair and potentially end up making Phil fold a 10 by the river. In this instance, I decided to bet 350, and Phil's in a pretty tough spot with bottom pair. Even though his hand does improve, it's not really in a way that allows him to call against a big bet, so I actually like his decision to fold here, even though in this exact moment he happened to be good. In this hand, we're playing 5-5-10-20, and as you can see, these extra straddles are coming into play pretty frequently. I find a raise with $75, and the card reader doesn't pick up my hand, but I have ace-8 of hearts. E 3-bets to $250, and Poker Traveler cold calls with pocket 3s. This is something that I've noticed a lot in the Texas games. When stacks are super deep, people feel much more incentivized to come along with these pocket pairs, even in 3-bet pots, as cold calls. Certainly not the first time I've seen it, but it still isn't something I was really looking out for yet. I think you'll see what I mean later on in the hand. Given that I have a decent suited ace and that E is a very competent, very tough, and aggressive regular, I don't think I should be folding this, particularly because this hand can flop some pretty nutted draws that will dominate others' draws. I come along as well. The flop comes queen 7-3, and we've got one of those pretty strong draws. I wish that the queen was one of the hearts, but doesn't get too much better than this, given that even if an ace-high board came out, I would be worried about being kickered. Poker Traveler checks, I check, and E checks back his Jack 10 of diamonds, which I think is pretty good on this board. He shouldn't really be c-betting his entire range, and he has pretty much no connection other than this backdoor straight draw, which he actually connects with on the turn. Poker Traveler with bottom set leads out for $300, and given that I have such a strong draw, it's pretty much always to the nuts. I don't really have much choice here but to continue. There is potentially some merit in raising here, since Poker Traveler can stab with a lot of hands once E decides to check back. E is fairly capped, and it's not like I can have tons of super strong hands. I probably don't have pocket queens in range. I can have 9s and 7s, but I may not even have queen 9 suited in this spot, and definitely no other 2 pairs. So I like his decision to bet, and I think I like my decision to call here as well. E is put in a really weird spot now because he's improved to one of his best cards, but given the action in front of him, he probably can't raise either. He decides to call as well, so we go 3 ways to the river in a very bloated and weirdly played 3-bet pot. The river comes an ace, and now we've improved to top pair, but Poker Traveler decides to bet, and he bets small. When he only bets $400 into this $1,700 pot, basically a quarter of the pot, it's a very odd spot because he's not really representing much, if anything, in the way of bluffs. However, his sizing is so small that his value can go pretty far down, I think. I try not to find myself in too many spots where I have a bluff catcher and I know my opponent doesn't have bluffs, but this is a rare spot because he's actually representing as though he could have just a strong queen, maybe even some weaker queens like queen jack suited, where he's kind of block betting to make sure that he doesn't face a bigger bet, and maybe sometimes gets value out of a pocket pair or a 9. The thing that complicates this more is that E is behind me. However, everything I said about him from pre-flop to the flop still applies here. He shouldn't really have any ace highs because I have ace high hearts. There's no other flush draws for him to float and get here with, so all I'm really worried about him having is a weirdly played ace queen or ace 7 or ace 9 suited. Again, those are heavily blocked, so I just don't really think he's much of a factor, and if I call, he's pretty much always folding. It would be pretty scary if I called and he raised, but again, it's hard to come up with hands he could even do that with. Given all that, I decide to call, expecting to lose a pretty reasonable frequency, but figuring it doesn't really matter at this price. E ends up folding as expected, and Poker Traveler shows us the bad news. Can't be too upset given how things played out exactly. We had the exact hand that sort of had to lose money here, the exact run out where we had to lose money, and overall, can't be that upset, but it's annoying to keep getting stuck further in this game.
Get closer to 300 right now, 629.
In this next hand, we're playing 5-5-10-20 once again. Brendan opens ace-10 suited on the button. I'm in the third blind with pocket sixes and briefly consider 3-betting, but I decide it doesn't really make a lot of sense in this spot. I call, Trig gets out of the way, and we go heads up to Jack 8 for two-tone. Brendan c-bets 100 after I check, and there's really no decision here. Our hand has a ton of showdown value and not much else going for it, so I just call. Turn is the 9 of clubs, giving Brendan a nut flush draw as well as open-ended. Wow, this is an action card. I check, planning to check call or check fold, depending on sizing and whether I just get any vibes from Brendan about how strong he is, but he just checks it back. This actually really surprised me, but I do think it's okay for him to mix this as a check back. He can have some really strong river raises. He can have some hands that are river raises as bluffs as well because he's already blocking the nuts. He's blocking specifically nut flushes. He's also blocking straights. And so regardless of what the river is, that's going to be true, and that's pretty powerful. However, the river comes a king, and there's just really no reason to bet my hand, so I check, and Brendan now has ace high left on the river in a spot where I pretty much always have something showdownable that beats him. He goes for the bet because of this, and I like his decision here. He pretty much has to go for it, and I'm in a pretty tough spot with now essentially fifth pair. I think it's a pretty easy fold. That's what I do, and Brendan gets one over on us here. Always nice when a fan of the vlog gets one through. And guys, by the way, I'm not being condescending toward fans of the vlog. Brendan's actually my friend, so I just thought it was funny when the commentators couldn't figure out if he was a friend of the channel, or just, I don't know, just a stalker. This hand we're playing 5-5-10-20 once again, and Poker Travel opens the button with 8-6 suited. Fill flats in the small blind with queen 9 suited, and I decide to 3-bet ace 10 off from the big blind with ace 10. Trey decides to cold call with 6-5 suited, which again kind of displays how weird these Texas games sometimes play, and Poker Traveler and Phil begrudgingly decide to get out of the way. We go heads up to 9-7-3 with 2 clubs, me holding the ace of clubs, so I've got some interesting opportunities potentially here. I check, and instead of facing a typical somewhere between $250 to maybe $600 bet, Trey bets $2,000. He does have a double gutter, and it's very obvious looking at his hand in the replay what he's trying to accomplish here. He just wants me to never really continue unless I have a pair or something, and even then, he's putting me in a really tough spot. Additionally, he doesn't let me call with hands exactly like I have, multiple backdoors, 2 overs, and hands that are actually beating him right now. However, I don't think his size is very efficient at all. Something like 2/3 to 3/4, maybe even pot would be much better, although it is a little bit weird with the stack size that I have in play. Maybe something like half would even be better so that he can just jam a bunch of turn cards, but it's certainly a weird spot for both of us. However, sticking it in is what he does, and that makes it very easy for us. It's just a very clear-cut fold. Even knowing his exact hand is in his range, we can't really find a call because he just has so many overpairs, one pair hands that aren't this. Granted, I am the 3-better, so it's not like he has to have every overpair in range. He probably 4-bets some of them, but I still think he's going to end up with like 10s, pocket 8s, a 9, quite a bit here. Given he has 6-5 suited, there's a lot of those hands in range, and I don't mind this fold at all.
Jess Giddy, you're welcome. Get with Mike, send him an email, and he'll get you on the stream. 3K, Brendan in the lead in seat 1, up 3K. Trey still up 2,200. Poker Traveler up 2,000.
One of those dudes is already dead as Phil folds.
You know, I play in the 1-2 game here, but
Good luck.
yeah, Mike, 1-2 is the
5 with winning $200, $300, $400.
I know. I won 960.
In this hand, I decided to get a little frisky, opening up to 75 with Jack 9 offsuit from under the gun +2. E calls with King 10 suited. John G calls with pocket 9s on the button. We somehow go only 3 ways to the flop when Poker Traveler folds Queen 8 suited in the final blind, and would have flopped top 2. You're going to see how this was good for us in a moment. E's got a flush draw, but I've got backdoor galore, and I see bet 175. E calls, and John G just gets out of the way with his second pair. The turn's the 3 of clubs, which changes nothing, but I'm starting to think that my hand is an okay candidate to triple off. Because of this, I'm going to start sizing up a bit, and maybe put some pressure on certain types of hands like draws that aren't going to be super happy, as well as maybe getting second pair to fold. I bet 475, and he starts eyeing my stack, seeing how much I have left, but ultimately decides to just call. The river's the 8 of clubs, which pairs the middle card, which typically I wouldn't consider to be a great card to barrel on, but when you look at this board, nothing's really come in. And given that I sized big on the turn, thinking that second pair might just fold, I think this is a spot where I can actually apply a lot of pressure to his range because it's just too weak. However, I don't think I need to go big here. E has Queen X in range that won't really fold to any size that I can make it here, and every other hand in his range is pretty much a missed draw or like a really weak pair somehow. If he doesn't fold second pair on the turn, he may even still have some pocket pairs that make it to this river, and they're probably just folding to a small size too. Because of this, and the fact that the 8 isn't really a range card for me, I decide to go small and just bet around a third of the pot, 650. E is obviously very skeptical. However, he has all of the worst kinds of cards here. He blocks gutters, he blocks flush draws, and ultimately he can't just call with king high, and jamming seems even worse. He just folds, and I get to get one through finally.
Yeah, that's true. Cumulative winnings. Poker Traveler and Brendan both win at 3,500. Trey up 2K. Jim up 120. Everybody else, CJ down 405.
John
Matt
G
Vaughn.
could buy a lot of skateboards with 3.7.
Matt Vaughn got a lot of his money back on that hand. Just down 750 now. From Avril Lavigne, I don't remember that. Mikey, what do you think your VPIP in a normal game would be?
Depends on the table lineup, but usually I can shift gears pretty regularly. I can be very, very active, or I can slow it down and be a little bit more selective. So it matters who's on your left, table position, who's on your right. So just depends on the night, Ricky. But we have the 5, 5, 10, 20, 40 on. So still plenty of action in this game as triple straddle in play.
Just kidding. You have to get permission. We do give some of these vloggers permission to record, but we get waivers signed by anybody who plays on our live stream. So yeah, you would have to get permission for any type of recording. Queen 5. Matt Vaughn will let it go. Over to Trey.
In this hand, Poker Traveler opens the button with deuces, and I call in the big blind with ace 10 suited. And for some reason, E also comes along. Flop comes King Jack 8 with 2 clubs, so pretty much a monster flop for us. We have a gutter to Broadway as well as the nut flush draw, and when Poker Traveler c-bets small, 75, I'm just going to be check raising here all day. We have a hand that's going to be able to barrel on a lot of runouts, so I put in 325, and both players quickly fold. It's nice to win the small pots too, I guess. In this next hand, I'm able to find a 3-bet with pocket jacks against WSU Jim, and he calls with pocket 5s. Flop comes out Jack 8-4, so we have top set and a very invulnerable type of spot. I decide to check because I'm out of position, and WSU Jim just checks behind. The turn is a 6 of clubs, which brings in a whole host of draws, making the board a lot scarier. I decide I need to go a little bit bigger here, denying equity to draws, so I go for 425, and he surprises me by raising. Now, when he doesn't stab the flop, I don't think he has many flushes here. He probably bets a lot of his flush draws on the flop right away, and I'm trying to think about what hands he could actually have here. I think every single set in his range could play this way, at least at some frequency, and there's a few weird suited 2-pair hands. He could also conceivably have a fair few draws, specifically with the ace of clubs, although a lot of players won't have too many offsuit ace-x hands here, so it could be that he has a few flushes. However, with the stack sizes behind as they are, there's just not really any choice here. I think I need to deny equity to his hands that have equity and try to get value from his sets now before any potentially action-killing cards come. I go for the shove, and he actually doesn't insta-fold, but he does get rid of it fairly quickly, and we just get to move on, winning another hand. In this next hand, we have a $20 straddle in play. I open the button with King 10 off, and WSU Jim once again calls with 9-7 of suited this time. The flop comes Queen 5-5, and we just have a very easy decision to c-bet. It's a board that will favor our range pretty significantly, so I just go for a pretty normal sized bet, and we get the fold. In this hand, Poker Traveler raises to 80 with a $20 straddle in play, and I'm in the cutoff and flat with pocket 9s. We could certainly go either way here. I think 3-betting, given all the blinds behind, could be the best play, but here I decide to just call. John G also calls with Queen 10 offsuit in the big, and we go 3-ways to a flop. Disaster. 8-8-7, so we have an overpair, and Poker Traveler has a boat. He checks, I decide to put out a bet for value, and he calls. The turn is a 3, and Poker Traveler checks. Now here's where I think the mistakes in this hand start, and it's not going to be where they end. At this point, I think that most of what we're targeting through Poker Traveler is going to be basically 7x hands that are suited, under pairs to the board, and the problem with this is that I think he could actually play over pairs this way at a very non-zero frequency. Plus, he has some slow plays like pocket 8s, pocket 7s, even some just suited 8x, although I do block that somewhat with 9-8 of hearts being totally impossible. I also think we could get some value from backdoor suited connectors, gutters that pick up flush draws, these sorts of things that can peel flop kind of light, but then pick up some equity. But the problem is those hands could even consider check raising, and then I'm in a world of hurt. And that's exactly what ends up happening. I put out a bet, 375. Poker Traveler puts the hurt on me for 1.1k. Against a weaker player, I could probably just fold because they wouldn't really have enough air here, but Poker Traveler's competent, and I would expect him to have at least some air. Now granted, this is a pretty underbluff spot even from good players, so I can probably still just fold here, but I talked myself into it. Without the 9 of diamonds in hand, I just thought that I could pretty much get away with peeling once and evaluating the river. But it's pretty uncomfortable, and I think we should just be getting away here. I don't in the game, so we go to a river card, which kind of bails me out, at least for making any more big mistakes. It's a 3, which double pairs the board, and Poker Traveler now doesn't feel like he can get value from anything. He probably feels like a very significant part of my range is an 8, and I don't think he's wrong, but he might not really realize how sticky I am and how much I give him credit for having a lot of air in this spot, or maybe I actually shouldn't after the fact in hindsight. Poker Traveler just checks. I get to check it back very happily, although I do kind of wonder what his range looks like if the distribution is a little more trappy or a little bit more showdown driven, and if I could ever actually bluff him off of a hand like this. But I don't think that's really going to be good since he can still have hands like quads and boats that actually beat an 8.
And getting rewarded tonight with some favorable.
In this hand, we're playing with a $20 straddle in play, and I open up ace-4 of diamonds from early position to 75. E picks ace-9 offsuit from the cutoff to 3-bet to 250, which I think is pretty far out of construction here, but he may just think I'm a little bit of a weaker sort of pro and just be targeting me. Not really sure. He's a pretty aggressive guy in general, so it could be unrelated, but it's possible that he's just kind of trying to test me here. However, regardless of all that, I just have a really good combo to 4-bet, and given my stack size, I think that I can put it somewhere where I threaten a lot of money going in without actually having to put a lot of my stack in practice. I 4-bet to 875 and he just quickly gets out of the way, so it's a kind of nice spot for me because obviously he technically has a really big equity advantage, even though my hand will play a little bit better post. Now, it's interesting to see these aggression frequency stats because a lot of times people point to the VPIP and they say, oh, wow, like, Matt's so nitty. But if you actually look at the actions I'm taking, I'm playing pretty aggressive and I'm more handcuffed by the card distribution I've received at the table than anything else. It's always fun to be at the top of some kind of leaderboard, even if it doesn't really count for much. Kind of feels like I won something. In this next hand, continuing the trend of pretty much only ever getting ace-x hands to play, I raised to 75 with ace-king in early position. Jim calls with ace-4 off on the button. Poker Traveler calls queen-7 suited in the third blind, and Phil, for some reason, calls 10-deuce in the last blind and just goes ahead and flops trips. Nice job, Phil. Checks to me, and I think that super multi-way, where theoretically nobody should have a deuce, Phil, I can go ahead and c-bet this hand. I have the king of spades, which means I have a couple of barrels and a couple of ways I can pick up equity besides an ace or a king, and I also just have the massive density of overpairs that nobody else can. However, I get 2 calls from Jim with a gutter and Phil with his trips, so when it checks to me on a 4, I'm just totally giving up here. Jim checks back as well, and the river just boats Phil up. I mean, again, is he in cahoots with the dealer here? He bets 350 now, and while it's tempting to not believe him here because a lot of players wouldn't bet like 6s through 9s, I just don't think we can really justify it. He can have some boats here as well, and it's hard to know what Jim has behind us. Don't really think we can call and expect Jim to fold 100% of his range, so I just get out of the way and we lose this hand.
Matt Vaughn.
That's good. So bad that it's good.
7.
Plenty of people on it.
In this hand, we're playing 5-5, 10, 20, and Phil raises to $85. I'm in the next blind with king-queen suited, and I 3-bet because, well, I just don't really think he's got much. He kind of gives me this side eye, and this hand's pretty playable anyway. It gets through, and we just get to take down a small one, but it's kind of fun to just, win a hand.
I know Mikey likes it.
They want more, Rick.
Yeah, I got to save one a night. That
Yep, and a buddy of mine, close buddy of mine, so we all have the Texas champ.
I think I have in between streams in June, and the room is packed.
Available, as well as the black hat.
70 or so degrees here in the lodge, 72, 73 degrees.
After what feels like an eternity of folding more hands, we play a really weird one. 5-5, 10, 20, 40, 100, 200. Yeah, that's a real hand, guys. This is a real hand that happened. I played it. You guys can't yell at me about not even seeing the $200 straddle hand, because I know the last time I played 5-5, a couple of you guys got up in arms. Understandably. So here you go. $200 straddles, biggest stakes of my life, must see. Folds around to Phil in the $10 blind. He bumps it up with king 9 off to 500. And you can kind of just tell that Phil wants to win a hand here. I'm in the $20 straddle, so there's a 40, a 100, and a $200 straddle behind me. I look down at ace 3 of hearts, and this hand could certainly go a number of different ways in certain contexts, but we're actually playing a pretty small SPR here. Given that there's a $200 straddle in play, Phil starts the hand with something like 4 or 4.5k, and I start the hand with about 5k myself. We're actually playing something like 20 blinds effective, turning this almost into a tournament spot, but even weirder with more dead money. Now you notice that as I'm thinking, Phil kind of looks over at me like sizing me up. Hey, what are you doing? What's going on? And this is actually the second time he's done this. The previous time I 3-bet the king-queen suited and he just folded. It kind of seems like he's maybe lightly trying to discourage me from doing anything. So given the kind of weird tournament-esque nature of the spot, and the live read sort of shenanigans that Phil's giving off, and the fact that I've probably got the tightest image at the table besides maybe Brendan, who's the fan of the second tightest player at the table, I just go for it here. I go for the jam, and I just kind of hope that the 3 players behind me don't wake up with a big hand, because frankly, they can't really call if they don't. However, I've literally never made a bet for 5k in my entire life at a live poker table, so this is kind of crazy. I jam my 4.8k into the middle and hold my breath as the players behind decide what to do. Trey folds before I can even get the chips out there with a hand that actually has some equity, and E folds ace-9 suited in a flash, totally dominating me. While it's obvious that his hand is in fact a clear-cut fold, it shows some of the value of doing this with this sort of a hand type. John G quickly follows suit with Jack 3, and Phil frustratedly folds a hand he could never ever call. It's kind of shocking to think that pretty much the biggest hand I've won on the night is a hand that I took down pre. That hand gets me much more significantly into profit, sitting on 925 in the black, and we go on with just a little bit more time left in the night.
Yeah, I like that. That just rapid fired, answered all the questions. Bang, bang.
Only 8 seconds. 80. Pocket sixes. 6-5.
In this hand, I put on one of my rare $40 straddles, but nobody decides to make it 100 behind me. John G with ace king bumps it up to 200 on the button. Phil jams with king 8 suited for 1.2k. Don't ask me what's going on here, and I just fold the jack 3 off. But hey, I just wanted to show I'm in it. I'm in it here with these $40 straddles. I'm working. I'm trying. I'm just, getting jack 3 offsuit and people are jamming 1200 in front of me.
CC, you need to be knocking on doors. Time here on May 8th, Saturday night. Win this hand.
Over to.
It's nice.
Anyways,
I still.
In this hand, Brendan opens to 90 over a $20 straddle. Poker Traveler just calls with ace king curiously, and Phil calls in the cutoff with jack 10 off. Trey sort of tries to fold out a turn here, and I'm on the button with ace jack offsuit, and what I think is a better squeeze opportunity than call opportunity. Even though I do have the button, I'd rather almost flat with the suited variety of this hand because it will play better multi-way, and 3-bet this one pretty much to try to get people to fold hands that just have some equity. I make it 450. Trey continues with his fold. Brendan begrudgingly ends up folding as well, and Poker Traveler, of course, with ace king does not fold, although I'm a little bit surprised he doesn't back raise. Phil hates it, but folds as well, and we go heads up to a flop of 10-8-5. Now, when he checks, I don't really think our hand functions super well as a c-bet. It doesn't have a lot of great blocker potential, besides the fact that it just blocks jack 10 and ace 10. However, I think Poker Traveler's range looks pretty pair dense here, and that's a hand type we can get to fold with multiple barrels by the river. We also don't have spades, so when I'm thinking about multiple barrels, I think that's good for us because we actually want him to have flush draws that get into tough spots by the turn or the river. We will get check raised here at non-zero frequency on this board type, but that's okay. This hand doesn't have a lot of equity against the check raising range. So given all that, I do decide to go ahead and c-bet and make it about half pot 550. Poker Traveler doesn't quite believe me, but doesn't think he can call, so he just lets it go and shows. I do not show this one.
He's thinking about it. Should I show it? Won't show it.
Just it's good on board. The play he.
In this hand, I decided to get a little frisky because I've been V-pipping so tight and just can't really help it. I open the Queen 9 offsuit in the hijack. Somehow we get called by 3 players, including John G with pocket queens in the small blind, and we flop the second nut straight on a super coordinated board. It checks to me and I have to go for a bet here, making it 150. John G calls. The turn is one of the worst cards in the deck. I guess at least it's not the 9 of clubs. It goes check, check. I don't think we're targeting much by betting here besides flush draws, and I'm just kind of not expecting to get a ton more value out of those anyway, although it could still be the right play to bet, a little on the smaller side, maybe half to 2/3 pot. The river comes with 3 of clubs. John G goes ahead and bets 400, and I know I have an insta-call here, even though it's a pretty uncomfortable spot. I'm basically always chopping if I'm not losing the hand. We do chop as expected, and I shake my hand in a little bit of disgust. It kind of feels like the first time I made a really big value hand with a decent chance of getting paid. But it's on to the next hand, or maybe several hands, where I fold like a little.
June 26th for our 2550 that says, if you don't like a vlogger, don't watch. What's going on out there? Do tell.
Maybe I had some bad sushi.
My goodness.
Blow it up in there tonight, so.
We've got about 30 minutes left, folks. And sometimes I walk over there and people.
Quiet lately, but now in the cutoff with a suited.
130 is the bet. Matt Vaughn folds. Trey.
At least.
Action.
Yeah, probably, posting minutes of play here coming down.
As you can see, my VPIP has been kind of creeping up and down throughout the night. I've been trying to stay pretty active, but it's been stabilizing out a little bit lower than most of the other players. However, I'm really trying here, so when I get dealt the 8-4 suited in the hijack with only a $10 single straddle in play, I decided to bump it up to 50, and lo and behold, we get to take it down. I fold 8 more hands that were even worse spots than that one.
50 we got here, so 5, 10, 20, 50.
Rampage Poker coming to Austin. He'll be
for about a year.
Yeah.
Rick, you got about third phone there, seeing what time it is.
Brendan up 3,100. Matt Vaughn up 1,600. I'm able to have one because Big Daddy D has. Yep. For tonight, Joe, 44%. Phil, 41.
On the air live.
On wood. And binked the tournament last night.
And I opened King Jack offsuit in the cutoff. Trey looks down at Ace Queen suited on the button and throws in a 3-bet. While he's been pretty active and has a kind of aggro image, he's actually pretty much had it the vast majority of the big pots he's played, and I don't think he's going after it too much pre here. When Joe cold calls out of the big blind, this hand just tends to shrivel. I'll often be dominated by one or more of the players, and I don't play that well multi-way given that I'm not suited. I just got out of the way, and in fact, I am in pretty bad shape. Although that was a pretty lackluster way to end the night, I did get to book the win here, 1.6k up or so, and had a pretty excellent time playing, although it was pretty hard balancing, trying to be active in the game, playing these massive stakes, and trying to just play well. Besides the commentators kind of shit-talking me a little bit, I had a really fun time, and honestly, I don't really mind how they talked about it. It was just kind of funny to me that I was the guest on the show, and it kind of felt like they were going out of their way to make it seem like I wasn't that great. Listen guys, I know I'm not that great, but you could subscribe, like this video, share it with a friend, comment down below for the algorithm, and I'll see you in this next video where I have my biggest winning session of all time.
5. Rough night for Phil, but he'll be back on, I believe, next Saturday, so a little chance at redemption for that. But we'll be back on Wednesday with Rampage Poker, and again another jam-packed game next Saturday. So till then, Ricky.
Yeah, for Dave Klaproth, the executive producer who punches all the buttons, for my partner, Mikey the Skull Reisman, my name is Slick Rick Epstein. We will see you Wednesday night at Poker Night at the Lodge.